Taal, I want to thank you for discussing the topic of rhythm and musical time with me today.
My pleasure, Tom. I hope I can offer your viewers something useful.
I'm sure you will. I want to start by asking you to introduce yourself. Some people may just think of you as a beat structure, but you are much more than that, are you not, Taal?
Oh yes, Tom, I am. Taal or tadla comes from a Sanskrit word for clap. In music, tadla refers to a rhythmic cycle. Specifically, tadla is the rhythmic framework for a performance of North Indian classical music.
This sounds a little like the Western notion of meter. Who plays the tala? The drummer?
Well, one doesn't need a drummer to play in a particular taal. One just needs to be able to count. But of course, drummers who play a pair of tuned drums called tabla can articulate the structural points of the tala. So yes, drummers play the tala.
What do you mean by structural points, Taal?
Well, each tadla is comprised of a number of individual beats, and these beats can be played by the tabla player.
How so?
Simple. To play the tabla, a drummer must learn a number of different drum strokes called bowls. And each of these strokes or bowls has a different name and corresponding sound. One of the first things a drummer in our tradition learns how to do is play in different tadlas by articulating their individual beats using various drum strokes.
I see. Go on.
So, for instance, the tadla called teen taal is a 16-beat taal comprised of a pattern of various drum strokes on the tabla. This pattern articulates where exactly we are in the 16-beat cycle.
How interesting, Taal.
Yes, it's very interesting. And remember, Tom, that even a simple tadla such as teen taal is comprised of 4 sections of 4 beats each. Each section of beats is called a vibhag. Moreover, there is always a point in the tadla where there is a contrasting or empty vibhag called the kadli section. In teen taal, this kadli section occurs starting on beat 10, that is, on beat 2 of the third vibhag. It is this kind of structural demarcation that helps musicians know where they are in the tadla cycle.
I think I understand. I must say, Taal, this sounds more involved than the Western notion of meter. And there are lots of other talas besides teen taal.
Oh yes, Tom. There are hundreds of talas, each with a different number of beats. For instance, besides the popular teen taal, there's the 10-beat cycle called jap taal, a 7-beat cycle called rupak taal, and numerous others too. Some of these tadlas are very long too, up to 108 beats.
But tell me, Taal, why would a musician need to play in different talas?
Good question, Tom. The simplest answer is that different talas create different feelings, just like different rags or collections of pitches have different affects when sung or played on a melodic instrument.
I never thought that this was possible with rhythm. What an interesting notion, rhythmic affect. So a 10-beat or a 7-beat tala will feel different from a 16-beat teen taal?
Yes, Tom. Each tala, you see, has its own personality. And don't forget, Tom, that tadlas can be played at different speeds too. This also changes the feeling they produce.
Wow, there's a lot to consider here. But now I'm trying to imagine how one actually counts in these different taals. It must be difficult, is it not? I mean, I don't imagine a 10-beat cycle is very natural or easy for us to count.
Well, Tom, certain tadlas can be difficult to count, but with practice they become second nature. And remember, musicians play or sing various musical patterns within the tadla they have chosen as their rhythmic framework. In fact, skilled musicians are able to improvise fluidly within the tala.
That sounds like an exceptionally difficult cognitive and physical challenge.
And yet experienced musicians such as Ravi Shankar or Shiv Kumar Sharma make it look and sound easy.
Indeed they do. But tell me, why is tala required in Indian music? Why can't musicians just improvise freely, without being locked into a rhythmic cycle?
Well, Tom, they do play freely at times, often in the introductory section of a performance called an alap. But when the tabla drums enter, the tadla begins to be explicitly felt.
I see. Like a ticking clock.
Yes, I suppose that's a fair analogy.
So, what then is gained from playing within a tala?
Well, it's that cognitive thrill you mentioned earlier, Tom. Musicians and listeners alike find it deeply satisfying to improvise or listen to someone improvise within a tala. It's exciting. Taal is a groove too, Tom. It's an exciting rhythmic space for musical interaction between musicians.
I think I am starting to get it now. But how does one know when musicians are interacting well within a taal?
The beats that comprise a taal are not all equally weighted, Tom. In fact, in addition to the Karli section I mentioned earlier, there is also one beat in particular that is much more important than all the others.
Which beat is this?
Beat 1 of the taal, Tom. We call this beat sum.
Sum. So, why is sum so important?
Because as the first beat of the taal, it's the destination, as it were, for musicians to culminate their phrases on. It's an ending and a beginning. In fact, musicians will pace their musical phrasing so that they finish on this beat 1, or sum as we call it. All this takes much skill and experience.
Indeed. This sounds fiendishly complex.
It does take disciplined practice as well as, I suppose, an ability to count as one improvises.
I bet.
And it goes further, Tom. Musicians will frequently repeat a phrase 3 times to create a rhythmic cadence called a T-high that also ends on sum or beat 1 of the taal.
Extraordinary.
Yes, it can be. And this is part of the pleasure in following a performance of Indian classical music, Tom. Audience members can even keep track of the taal themselves, using their fingers and hands. This is called keeping taal.
That would certainly raise the stakes for the musicians, wouldn't it?
Yes, in a way. Everyone is always counting, and so this keeps the musicians on their toes, as it were.
Everyone is always counting indeed. There is clearly a lot to learn here. Before we end our conversation though, Taal, tell me what you think of the rhythmic structures of Western popular music today. I'm referring to rock music, rap music, country, as well as electronic dance musical idioms.
Well, Tom, even a cursory listen reveals a quite a limited engagement with rhythmic cycles outside of a 16-beat framework. I suppose there are exceptions, such as that snappy jazz tune Take 5, as well as a lot of progressive rock music. And I'm sure there are many other examples. But on the whole, a lot of music stays within rhythmic cycles that sound, for lack of a better word, square.
Yes, I have to agree. Musical squareness. Now, why do you think this is?
Well, Tom, perhaps the pleasure in these popular musical idioms derives more from what is being said lyrically, or from the particular textures of the music, or even, as is the case with rap, from the syncopated verbal flow that happens over top of a relatively simple rhythmic framework. I really don't know though, as I'm no expert. I'm just a concept. But yes, from the standpoint of complex taalas, these musics are perhaps not so interesting.
In this sense, Western musicians would probably benefit from expanding their repertoires of rhythmic cycles then, could they not?
That might lead to interesting results, yes.
Thanks for talking with me today, Taal. You've helped me better understand some nuanced rhythmic concepts.
You're welcome, Tom. And be sure to watch the YouTube clip below that features the musicians Ravi Shankar and Alara Akka playing in Taal.